description of the journalist is sometimes misleading. Recount the whole story to me." Japp crossed legs comfortably and began. "As all the world and his wife knows, on Tuesday last a grand victory ball was held. Every tuppenny halfpenny hop calls itself that nowadays, but this was the real thing, held at the Colossus Hall, and all London at it, including young Lord Cronshaw and his party." "His dossier?" interrupted Poirot. "I should say his bioscope. No, how do you call it? Biograph." Viscount Cronshaw was the 5th Viscount, 25 years of age, rich, unmarried, and very fond of the theatrical world. There were rumours of his being engaged to Miss Courtney of the Albany Theatre, who was known to her friends as Coco, and who was by all accounts a very fascinating young lady. "Good, continue." Lord Cronshaw's party consisted of 6 people. He himself, his uncle, the Honourable Eustace Beltane, a pretty American widow, Mrs. Mallaby, a young actor, Chris Davidson, his wife, and last but not least, Miss Coco Courtney. It was a fancy dress ball, as you know, and the Cronshaw party represented the old Italian comedy, whatever that may be. "The commedia dell'arte," murmured Poirot. "I know." Anyway, the costumes were copied from a set of china figures forming part of Eustace Beltane's collection. Lord Cronshaw was Harlequin, Beltane was Punchinello, Mrs. Mallaby matched him as Pulcinella. The Davidsons were Pierrot and Pierrette, and Miss Courtney, of course, was Columbine. Now, quite early in the evening it was apparent that there was something wrong. Lord Cronshaw was moody and strange in his manner. When the party met together for supper in a small private room engaged by the host, everyone noticed that he and Miss Courtney were no longer on speaking terms. She'd obviously been crying and seemed on the verge of hysterics. The meal was an uncomfortable one, and as they all left the supper room, she turned to Chris Davidson and requested him audibly to take her home, as she was sick of the ball. The young actor hesitated, glancing at Lord Cronshaw, and finally drew them both back to the supper room. But all his efforts to secure a reconciliation were unavailing, and he accordingly got a taxi and escorted the now weeping Miss Courtney back to her flat. Although obviously very much upset, she did not confide in him, merely reiterating again and again that she would make old Cronch sorry for this. That is the only hint we have that her death might not have been accidental, and it's precious little to go upon. By the time Davidson had quieted her down somewhat, it was too late to return to the Colossus Hall, and Davidson accordingly went straight home to his flat in Chelsea, where his wife arrived shortly afterwards, bearing the news of the terrible tragedy that had occurred after his departure. Lord Cronshaw, it seems, became more and more moody as the ball went on. He kept away from his party, and they hardly saw him during the rest of the evening. It was about 1:30 a.m., just before the grand cotillion, when everyone was to unmask, that Captain Digby, a brother officer who knew his disguise, noticed him standing in a box, gazing down on the scene. "Hello, Cronch," he called. "Come down and be sociable. What are you moping up there for like a boiled owl? Come along, there's a good old rag coming on now." "Right," responded Cronshaw. "Wait for me or I'll never find you in the crowd." He turned and left the box as he spoke. Captain Digby, who had Mrs. Davidson with him, waited. The minutes passed, but Lord Cronshaw did not appear. Finally, Digby grew impatient. "Does the fellow think we're going to wait all night for him?" he exclaimed. At that moment, Mrs. Mallaby joined them, and they explained the situation. "Say now," said the pretty widow vivaciously, "he's like a bear with a sore head tonight. Let's go right away and rout him out." The search commenced, but met with no success until it occurred to Mrs. Mallaby that he might possibly be found in the room where they had supped an hour earlier. They made their way there. What a sight met their eyes! There was Harlequin sure enough, but stretched on the ground with a table knife in his heart. Japp stopped, and Poirot nodded and said with the relish of the specialist, "Une belle affaire. And there was no clue as to the perpetrator of the deed? But how should there be?" "Well," continued the inspector, "you know the rest. The tragedy was a double one. Next day there were headlines in all the papers, and a brief statement to the effect that Miss Courtney, the popular actress, had been discovered dead in her bed, and that her death was due to an overdose of cocaine. Now, was it accident or suicide? Her maid, who was called upon to give evidence, admitted that Miss Courtney was a confirmed taker of the drug, and a verdict of accidental death was returned. Nevertheless, we can't leave the possibility of suicide out.